So what if I could just drag a node on that could change the data? And then what if I could drag on a node that could do some conditional logic as to where it should go? And yeah, it just snowballed from there because, again, alongside we were doing real customer projects. So we had this steady stream of real concrete requirements of, oh, wouldn't it be handy if the tool did this? Or wouldn't it be handy? Not because it's some blue sky idea, but because tomorrow we've got to do a customer project that's going to need to be able to do that.
Welcome back to another episode of Unplugged, an IIoT podcast. Today, we've got an incredible conversation lined up for you, full of insights that you're not going to want to miss. But before we dive into that, I want to take a quick moment to thank our main sponsor today, Smithtek. Smithtek specializes in turnkey hardware and software solutions, making remote monitoring and control a breeze. Whether it's agriculture, mining, industrial automation, or even environmental monitoring, Smithtek has you covered. Built right in Perth, Western Australia, their products are reliable, scalable, and adaptable to your needs, whether you're managing pumps, irrigation systems, or generators from afar. Plus, with their web-based SCADA system and support for a wide range of industrial protocols, integrating your systems is seamless. Their user-friendly interface gives you real-time control anytime, anywhere. If you're looking for a smarter way to manage your assets, Smithtek makes it easy and efficient. With that said, let's dive into today's conversation.
And welcome to Unplugged, an IoT podcast, where we dive deep into the fascinating world of industrial Internet of Things and automation. I'm your host, Phil Seboa.
G'day, Phil, and I'm Ed Fuentes. Well, Phil, this is one we've been looking forward to for a little while now. We have a very special guest with us, Nick O'Leary. Thank you, Nick. He's the CTO and he's a founder of FlowFuse, but probably what's really interesting for us, Phil, is that we've got a chance to meet another co-creator. We met Alan not long ago, the co-creator of MQTT. Now we've got one who's co-created Node-RED, which is, I know that you're pretty passionate about, and we've seen lots of information and discussion around Node-RED and its journey. So it's really great that we get a chance to talk to Nick and hear from him how it's created, how it's become now a programming tool that's really revolutionized how we manage and do IoT industrial automation. So Nick's has over 19 years of experience with IBM. He started at IBM, been a key figure in shaping that IoT space. So we're really excited to dive into his journey and understand the evolution of Node-RED and FlowFuse, who he now heads up. So thank you, Nick.
Nick, welcome to the show. I guess we start here, with the foundations, understanding a bit about your journey and if you can give us some insight into how Node-RED was born, and maybe even give us some insight into what is Node-RED for people that aren't, maybe across it. I think if they're listening to this podcast, they might have heard it. I think we're in safe waters, but it'd be good to hear it from you.
Of course. Well, yeah, thanks guys for having me. I always enjoy talking all things Node-RED. So yeah, well, what is Node-RED for those if you haven't come across it? It's a low-code programming tool that makes it really easy to build what we describe as event-driven applications. So you can, in your browser, quickly drag and drop effectively what look like flowcharts of how you want your data to flow, where you want to get it from, what you want to do with it, where you want to put it. But even that undersells just the versatility and flexibility of what Node-RED can do. So fill our time just talking about the wonders of Node-RED, but some of that background, some of that history around it was, where it all started was back when I was working at IBM in our emerging technologies team, doing IoT type projects, even though, the IoT term was in its very earliest days then. And when I say IoT projects, they'd be very short, like 1 week, 2 week proof of concept pieces, quick turnaround. A customer would want, what can we do with this data? Well, first we've got to get the data, those sorts of challenges. And a great thing being in that team was we were afforded a lot of time and space to just keep our skills current, to do innovation, invention outside the context of specific customer projects. So I was between some projects and I had a history at IBM, pervasive messaging, part of the MQTT standards group, working with Andy Stanford Clark, co-creator of MQTT. So I'd long had this idea of having a tool that helps you visualize mapping of data from MQTT topics, just to help you understand what's going on in your MQTT world. So that had been a half-baked idea of something I wanted to play with at some point. And then, I just had this a window of opportunity to start playing some new technologies, and thought, oh, let's dust off that old idea of visualizing how, where data comes from and what you want to do with it. In a couple of days, just mocked together a visualization of exactly that. And then showed it to my colleague, Dave Conway Jones. And I said, this is showing me data come from MQT, or visualizing the idea that data is coming from MQTT from this topic, and I'm pushing it to that topic. And this says, and it wouldn't take much for me just to be able to drag another one on, configure it, and then push a button and make that start happening. And he just looked at me and said, well, go on then. So I went back to my office, and kept playing. And again, in a day or two, I had something working where, recognizable as Node-RED today, of dragging a node into the canvas, configuring it, what MQTT topic it would get data from, and then connect it to a wire to another MQTT topic. And that started the ball rolling, because it wasn't setting out to be this, what it has turned into and the success it's had today. It was very much just a proof of an idea of visualizing of MQTT messaging. But then we thought, well, now we're getting the data, it would be useful to do something with it. So in those first few sort of days and weeks, it was very much just building a tool to help us, something with this vague idea of a concept, realizing there was some value there, and then literally day by day, just enhancing it to enable us to do the work we were doing as our day job even better. As I say, it didn't really start out with this big grand scheme of being a tool that it has turned into today. It was very much just a tool we were using for our day jobs and being successful with.
It's really interesting because it's very similar to the birth of MQTT in the way that it was kind of created for internal use cases, right? Arlen mentioned his time at IBM was, focused on customer journey, right? Trying to solve a problem for the customer, and it's very similar process, right? From your space, I guess, was it focused around an IT problem, or was it leaning towards that IoT approach, even though IoT was probably not termed in that sense?
I mean, in the early days, it was very much getting data from a sensor that had been plugged, a random sensor would be plugged into a device. It's a serial port. We need to grab some data from it. Those were the typical use cases early on. So yes, it was quite IoT aligned, if you like, just from the nature of the sorts of projects we were doing. But as a broader team, the emerging tech team, were doing projects in all sorts of different areas. And so others in the team would pick it up and start turning it to other uses that weren't IoT. So broadening out, being able to create HTTP REST APIs, being able to start talking to online services, use cases much more diverse than just IoT, which was it meant we kept it quite, as a platform, quite a generic platform and quite flexible on purpose, even though our main use cases in the early days were very IoT aligned.
The product itself, you built here, Nick, with your colleagues, and then you, I suppose, watching other team members use that same platform, it evolved into quite a strong open source product that then just went across the industry. And I think we've seen it mold around. And I'm sure that when that happens, it's how do you keep it under control? How do you maintain the standards? It's similar to what Arlen did with the Eclipse Foundation, and not just that, but with CirrusLink. But how do we? So is that the similar journey as to FlowFuse? Tell us why. What was FlowFuse's origin, or why was it created, or what were the problems you were trying to solve?
Yeah, so Node-RED as a project started 11, 12 years ago plus. And we were fortunate to be able to open source it very early on in its life. And we had great support from IBM, including some key moments along the way was contributing the project to the OpenJS Foundation. So this is a open governance organization like Eclipse, like the Apache, another foundation in that space, so that as a project, it would be openly governed. There couldn't be a single company in control. And that was very much in response to companies who had seen the open source, who were interested in it, were slightly wary of it being just a single vendor. It's open source, but really it's IBM in control type of thing. Putting open governance around it helped open up possibilities for a number of customers to pick it up. Through my time at IBM, whilst Node-RED wasn't necessarily my day job, I was working on it alongside what I was doing at IBM. We had customers at IBM adopting it for their own use, but it's still not an IBM product, it's open source, and that's all well and good. And because it wasn't, as an open source project, we didn't have the resources to solve every problem under the sun that we would like. So we kept it quite focused to being Node-RED as a single user runtime type thing, and focus on that as it's the core value of Node-RED. But through that time, talking to customers, there were all companies interested in using it. We started recognizing there were certain challenges they would have around how you can then, what if you want to have a dozen Node-RED runtimes or 100 or 1,000 because you're running on all these devices? How do you manage that at scale? And those are the sorts of problems that, frankly, we just, in the open source, we didn't have the contributors coming to the project to help solve those problems. And again, they were, for the majority of the community, they weren't necessarily problems that the community were interested in solving for the individual user. So it was clear there was this interest and demand, and we were seeing companies having to roll their own sorts of solutions for how to solve that. So when the opportunity came up to start FlowFuse, it was quite clear in my mind that there was this opportunity to build an offering around Node-RED that helps organizations who want to run lots of Node-RED and bring all those sorts of qualities to the platform around security, compliance, frankly, the boring stuff that you have to, it's boring, but you need it for enterprise software, that you want to get out of the way of your engineers being able to build their solutions. And the best way you can do that is by having a platform that takes care of all of those criteria that organizations need in the software they're deploying, so they can rely on it and they can trust it. And so that was really the motivation for what we're creating at FlowFuse. And the response has been great from the Node-RED community and from those people adopting it. It's seeing, whilst we had anecdotal from the conversation in the community that there was demand for this, just now it's there, it's something that people can come and find. It is evident that there's a lot of interest and a lot of desire for the sorts of things we're building here at FlowFuse.
Yeah, I think scale is a challenge across IoT, broadly, right? And if you're I can see FlowFuse's value in that orchestration layer, understanding all those different flows, doing, becoming a repository for configurations, for managing different instances within the same ecosystem, or conversely, bridging the gap between ecosystems as well. So yeah, I see a lot of development on your side in terms of, some of the, certified node infrastructure, some of the project communication layers as well as something that I'm hugely appreciative of is the dashboarding component as well, right? A huge contributor to that. So there is definitely some needs that were met by the starting up of FlowFuse as well. So I want to say thank you as well for that, because I know I've spent hours and hours in Node-RED trying to orchestrate my platforms in my humble smart home as well. So I can definitely say thank you from the community side for that. And yeah, I guess that's one of the challenges around a Node-RED instance is around that data governance piece as well. I guess how do you see FlowFuse and maybe just solving some of those governance concerns from what was an open source product, and how can we educate the community to give them more trust in an open source product like Node-RED?
Yeah, so I mean, a key part of Node-RED's success over the years has been the community. And the flexibility that you have in Node-RED is the over, 4,000 or 5,000 third-party nodes that have been published by the community to extend its capabilities. Now, that's great, but it doesn't come for free in the sense of that's a lot of third-party contributions that you can choose to install into Node-RED. But from an enterprise software standpoint of software, being aware of what software you're running in your organization, there is still in a lot of traditional organizations a nervousness around open source. It's one thing to have competence in the core of Node-RED, but when your engineers then can start installing any third-party node in, perhaps it hasn't gone through the sorts of security audits and checks that the organization would like of a software product, there are some challenges there. So one of the things we've done at FlowFuse is we do provide what we call our certified nodes catalog. So they are still the third-party nodes, but they are nodes that we do additional checks on, and we really want to help users find the nodes that will help them solve their problems. So that's one approach we're taking. We're also we are an open core company. One of our strong tenets is FlowFuse will only be successful as long as Node-RED is successful. So we continue to invest in the Node-RED project. We will work with node authors where there are needs to, and we want the Node-RED ecosystem to be successful, because in turn that will help FlowFuse become successful. But for us, it's for organizations to bring software inside their firewall. Open source is a common choice, but companies always feel better when there is who can I phone when it goes wrong type of thing. And again, that's something we at FlowFuse are able to provide, is actual enterprise support for the platform. And also a lot of our team are from the Node-RED community and have been involved with the Node-RED community for longer than FlowFuse has existed. It just brings a lot of credibility, but also just knowledge and awareness and familiarity with what Node-RED can do and how it can be used. So that's again looking at how we can give back to the Node-RED community, and that's all part of the value that we can bring at FlowFuse.
If we talk about that community a bit, Nick, I think that you've mentioned it a few times, and it seems to be like almost the heartbeat of Node-RED and where it is and how it developed. It's an incredible community. You mentioned that some of your team and most of your team are involved in the community, which is great. How does that community, how do they feed back? How do they shape Node-RED? How does it develop? Has there been major milestones you've hit? Because I imagine, Nick, that when you developed it to where it is today, like everything you create, you never know what it's going to be like, 10, 15, 20 years down the track. So if you can give me some ideas of what were the key milestones you hit through that development phase, and how do you manage that? How's the community manage that development?
It's a super interesting, because unlike a lot of open source projects or sort of developer focused open source projects, where your community of users are people who are also going to contribute back to the core of the open source project. For the Node-RED community, it's a low code programming tool. It isn't a JavaScript development tool, even though it is all based on JavaScript. So it does mean a lot of our community and a lot of our user base aren't natural JavaScript developers. And then that's the power of Node-RED. They are empowered to be able to develop great stuff with Node-RED. So there's no shortage of ideas, feedback, commentary on the capabilities of Node-RED. But we don't necessarily have the depth of community of people who are then jumping into the core of Node-RED to help move things forward. It is a much smaller sort of contributor community around it. And we've been fortunate over the history of the project to have companies like Hitachi invest a lot of their developer time. There have been notable features in Node-RED over the years. So the projects mode we added that gives you Git integration and version control. There's been things like, deep in the weeds of features in Node-RED, but point being, the community is great at coming up with the ideas. Our challenge is then because those ideas don't often then come with the lines of code to make them a reality. I will say, I think some of the pace of development of Node-RED, some things have just taken longer than I would personally like, but that's purely just a factor of we've got manage our time. It is open source. It is beyond where we choose to invest our time at FlowFuse. You can't rely on individuals contributing their spare time to meet a deadline. That isn't how open source works. So it is certainly a challenge in the project of how we just keep things moving forward at a pace. But it's also been quite a deliberate choice not to develop too quickly, if that doesn't sound strange. We took the choice to only do a major version once a year. So we are quite careful about when we ship new features. Because again, organizations who are embedding Node-RED need stability and don't want to have a constant churn of a constant stream of new features as much as some in the community would like it. It's trying to, if we developed and released stuff too quickly, some traditional organizations would then end up perhaps only updating once a year type of thing. And again, that's, I think that is changing, but there was definitely, through the life of the project, feedback we had from organizations that they needed predictability and stability. But ultimately, as I say, we've got a great community and there's no shortage of ideas and feedback and concepts. The challenge we have in the core of the community is then working out, okay, what of those ideas belong in the core of Node-RED? What could just be a third-party plugin? And getting that balance right is a challenge. But as I said, there's lots of people doing really interesting things in the community. The fun is trying to pull it together
it's pretty amazing, I guess, the adoption rate of Node-RED, right? You mentioned embedding the software into devices, device layers. We've seen that quite widely adopted with mainstream industrial vendors taking on Node-RED as their control plane on their IoT edge devices. So I guess that's one of those challenges, right? Is to help vendors have this, sometimes their own branded Node-RED instances running on their own software, and make sure that it's within the tolerances of the hardware and all these kinds of I guess use cases, and keeping it up to date is one of those challenges for vendors that have implemented embedded Node-RED. They want to give their customers peace of mind for for not just functional reasons, but security reasons and all these kinds of facets as well, and do their due diligence when they start putting their products on the market. So yes, I totally understand those challenges around the community driven aspect and taking those not necessarily like enterprise software views into those kinds of conversations. I guess to take it away from, I guess, the development point, I guess, and in application, I mean, you would have seen some really cool Node-RED instances out there, I guess. Do you have any sort of, I guess, use cases that you can share with us that you're kind of like blown away from with as well?
I will say up front, some of the coolest stuff I know is stuff I just can't talk about. But which I know it sounds mysterious and all, but I still often feel like Node-RED's my little side project that I started all those years ago. And then when I start seeing well-known companies, and just hear some of the stories of what they're doing with it, it's just like, that side. On the one hand, it's like, it's awesome. Well, it is always awesome to hear those stories. And I always say whenever I do talks that, I'd love to hear the stories from the community. Things like, again, without getting to specifics, there are theme parks in the world running Node-RED to do all of their visitor interactions with the sort of the wristband type interactions with everything at the theme park is all Node-RED. And this thing, there are so many, but I think the key point is, I always think back to the first real project I was using it in when the project was like 2 or 3 months old, and it was an ice cream factory. And I had visions of sort of Willy Wonka, sort of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory type. But it was a proper industrial location, and they wanted us to retrofit sensors to this line, and we had one day to do the fit out. So, and it was a test production line. It wasn't it was where they were developing the systems to create the chocolate. So they wanted to capture some data. So we turned up with a bag full of Raspberry Pis and Arduinos, just set about, retrofitting all these sensors to this particular manufacturing line to capture data at key points in the process, running Node-RED across all these Pis to coordinate capturing data from all these places. And that was the real, for me personally, being hands-on doing a project, thinking, this is awesome. This has made our life so much easier. To the point where, because this location was a couple 100 miles from where we were based. So we were there literally for one day to do this fit out, and then we left. And they phoned a week later to say their floor engineer to say they'd had to swap one of the sensors. So now the voltage range mapped to a different pressure range. And he was saying, when can you guys come back up to update the software, and how long will it take? Whilst I was on the phone with him, I logged into the VPN, opened up the node that mapped voltage to pressure, entered in the number, and before he had asked when could you come up to update the software, I said it's updated. I think just the fact that this was Node, if it had been the Arduino code, that would have been a pain because that's going up and plugging in. But no, it was the Node-RED that I could update remotely and also show him how to update it for himself, because being an electrical engineer, or that's sort of the floor engineer, he wasn't a software guy, but he understood. A classic example of the value of Node-RED and the low code. He knew the problem they were trying to solve, and he could understand that flow of information. He didn't need to understand about the lines of code, but he could understand, well, here's a box and it says it's mapping these numbers to these numbers, and I can type in the new numbers and away we go. So that's awesome. And then on the flip side, you mentioned the dashboard work we've been doing. Always blown away by organizations who are running Node-RED, gathering the data, but who are then able just to throw dashboards up across their factory floor so easily and adapt them so readily for the needs of a particular location, a particular line. And there's a great example of a clothing company who automate they're sort of a print on demand type place. They automate the whole factory with Node-RED. This is a number of years ago. But they had a dashboard giving all the stats of how many t-shirts and all the stuff you kind of expect. But in the corner, it had the pigeon incident count. And I went and visited, and we asked about that, and it was because their factory was this old shop, and sometimes pigeons would get in to the print room. So they had a dashboard that would count how many times had a pigeon got into their factory. But it's that flexibility and just the fun that people can have when they've got the tools and at their disposal to do what they need.
I'm thinking, Nick, that you've got some good anecdotes, and a lot of our people that watch this podcast are could be different in the manufacturing industry, operational technology or manufacturing, and some of them probably never ever use Node-RED. So what could be for them a low-hanging fruit? You mentioned a few there already. They've got running a factory. What would be, if you can help them? Okay, let's you need some hardware, get Node-RED, like you said, get some IO. How long would it take? You mentioned a few things you did pretty quickly, but what sort of investment should they make? Or what could be a low-hanging fruit for them to do?
Yeah, on the OT side, a great example for what we do internally at FlowFuse is, we've got Node-RED running in FlowFuse Cloud. So, what key to get started? Well, you can sign up to FlowFuse Cloud and get a Node-RED running in moments on our platform if you just wanted to try it out to see what it's worth doing. But internally, we've got a whole bunch of dashboards of doing analytics and insights to activity on our cloud platform. We've got a whole bunch of data being thrown into databases, as you would expect from just monitoring. And then like just this morning, we had a conversation about, because the FlowFuse platform, you can self-host as well as we host it. And we get telemetry data back from those self-hosted ones. That all goes into a database. And this morning, someone just asked a question, I wonder, is there a correlation between operating system and specifics don't matter. But in about 2 or 3 minutes, let's create a flow, does the database query, pushes that data onto a dashboard. And, rather than some going and digging into a spreadsheet, there's now a dashboard that answers the question that someone had. And it took, 5 or 10 minutes, if that, of pulling together. So on the OT side, yeah, that's not IoT data or anything like that. That's sort of operational data of the business. So on that side, where you've got a data and you just want to ask some questions of it, and you just want to throw it into a table or a graph, and it might be, you might decide actually there's nothing there. Fine, it's not a huge investment, but at least I've done that investigation. Or you realize actually that's really interesting, and then Node-RED can help you pull data from different places together, and it's that sort of data fusion and aggregation that you're then saying, well, actually, if I pull that data from that database, and I wonder if there's a correlation with these things going on over here, and Node-RED makes it super simple to then just start pulling that data into one place and start answering the questions. So from as a tool to sort of explore your data, there's a lot of value there as well, which again, great for the OT side to start playing with. For both sides, that is valid on both sides of the organization. The flexibility that you can
That's great.
Start exploring.
I want to take a quick moment to thank our main sponsor today, Smithtek. Smithtek specializes in turnkey hardware and software solutions, making remote monitoring and control a breeze. Whether it's agriculture, mining, industrial automation, or even environmental monitoring, Smithtek has you covered. Built right in Perth, Western Australia, their products are reliable, scalable, and adaptable to your needs, whether you're managing pumps, irrigation systems, or generators from afar. Plus, with their web-based SCADA system and support for a wide range of industrial protocols, integrating your systems is seamless. Their user-friendly interface gives you real-time control anytime, anywhere. If you're looking for a smarter way to manage your assets, Smithtek makes it easy and efficient.
The conversations that I'm having, with engineers in the community is that, people getting started with digital transformation type initiatives, just trying to understand what the technologies are on both sides of IT and OT. You talked about REST endpoints and APIs, integration. We're talking about serial protocols. We're talking about Modbus devices. It's a real bridge between those two worlds. And at low cost, no cost type scenario. I personally found it really a playground to start creating a UNS, as well. So very, very close to MQTT, obviously from its history, as well as, modeling that data and then doing something with the data. That's the critical part of that sort of transformation space. So you can learn all the technicalities of it, and people that, the visual component of it accelerates that learning because it's understandable, right? I'm no coder like at all. And so that bridge between, just you can go as deep or you can go as high as you want, and having the flexibility there, it's been really quite interesting.
Certainly one of the parallels in the early days of the project, when we'll be talking about it to non-engineering types, shall we say, of what it's about. We always likened it to the Office applications. So you've got Word for dealing with words, you've got Excel for dealing with numbers, you've got PowerPoint for dealing with ideas. These are all tools that it's all about abstraction. You're making it easier and accessible to work with these things. What's your medium that you want to work in? And with Node-RED, it's the medium is your data, it's the events, it's the things that are happening, and making it accessible. And you talk about UNS, absolutely. That's a really interesting topic these days in industrial IoT. Looking forward, I'm keen to look at how we can make the Node-RED editor experience even more supercharged with helping you work with that data. It's one thing to know, to get data from MQTT, how can it help you actually understand what you're getting, help you visualize what you're getting? Lots of super interesting things to come in Node-RED, I think, as we look at how it's used. And keep in mind that, just as you described, it's how can we help the non-programmer do the most powerful things they can?
Yeah, I guess that's the perfect segue to, I guess, what does the future of low code look like? I know from my past, I guess, visiting some of your webinars, you've implemented some, I guess, AI within the FlowFuse product space, and maybe you can talk a bit about that space.
So specifically, what we've done in FlowFuse is we've added the FlowFuse assistant in the Node-RED instances we manage, which gives you two things. It helps you write your function code. So where you need to write some JavaScript, we've integrated an AI assistant. You can describe what you want it to do, and it will generate the code for you. But it is very much an assistant. It isn't there to do all the work for you. I think that, for me personally, I think that's the power of AI isn't necessarily going to replace what we do, but it's going to help us do what we want to do. So industry, it's going to be interesting to see how quickly some of these things get adopted, because when we talk about AI as a generic term, it covers a lot of ground, and there will be those who say, well, actually, we've been doing machine learning for 20 years in terms of anomaly detection, and so all the sort of statistical type modeling. What's interesting for the last couple of years is the sort of the generative AI. And I think it's going to be interesting to see what place that has in the more sort of traditional industrial use cases. But simple things from understanding, trying to make sense of the data and what extra insights can be generated from it. I think that's super interesting. But again, I think the more obvious use cases of AI are ones that are sort of well understood, I think, in industry around the machine learning side and being able to recognize patterns and all those sorts of stuff. But looking at how we can bring that to Node-RED and continue to bring it to Node-RED is super interesting. And then, how can we bring those tools like the FlowFuse assistant to help generate the actual application itself? It's an interesting space. And one of the challenges we have is a lot of these agents are only as good as the data they're trained on. And for something, so which means they're really good at JavaScript, because there's so much JavaScript in the world, and that they're super powerful there. It's a bit more of a challenge where you want to then bring it into the Node-RED specific environment. And we've had to do some work to make sure the agent realizes it's not just general JavaScript. It has to be JavaScript that's going to run as a Node-RED node. And so some interesting challenges there. But the team have done a great job, and it's super useful. The other use we have for the FlowFuse assistant actually is often when you're developing, you don't have access to the live data, so you want to be able to simulate data to develop against, and that's been a really interesting use case we've seen for the FlowFuse assistant, saying, create me a function node that can, and then you should describe the sort of data you wanted with some random variation, so on and so forth. And it will produce a node that will start spitting out data as you describe it and enable you to then build a flow and develop a flow against it. Now, again, it's only as good as your ability to describe what you want, but it's really fascinating to see, actually you can get some pretty powerful stuff generated without having to jump through lots of hoops with it. I think it's interesting.
I'm sure I guess the community is already kind of leveraging those large language models to create flows as well. I can definitely talk to that because I have ChatGPT as a collaborator on my own systems as well. So having that embedded assistant can speed up the development. As long as you've got a good idea of what the end state looks like, it can navigate those challenges within the technicalities, especially from a non-technical person, right? As well, who doesn't know JavaScript and stuff like that. They know what good looks like. At least we can have someone come in that maybe to verify the process as well. So it's super interesting how we've started adopting and growing the Node-RED kind of ecosystem to conform with what's happening in the technology landscape as well.
And with the fact that we've got this platform, Node-RED, and IT and OT. You know, you mentioned AI agents, and I think they're applicable anywhere in the business. And there's a whole suite now of platforms, I suppose, to a degree, being made up as options for OT and IT professionals, and Node-RED definitely sits among them. What are some of the things that Node-RED does fix, or the challenges that people face, especially when it comes to this IT, OT? You know, what do we use in the OT layer? What do we use in the IT layer? How do you make sure that these products are talking? We're talking about UNS, getting access to the agents, and and you mentioned about FlowFuse, editor, and all those applications. What are the challenges, and how do we work, or how do you focus on those challenges with this IoT, its landscape of different solutions?
It is certainly a challenge, and I think having those tools that can help bridge the two worlds, help the different parts of the organization just talk to each other, and have a common language of an understanding, I think is super powerful. And as companies go through that digital transformation journey, looking at understanding what data they have, and again, a great power with Node-RED is it just helps unlock sources of data on the factory floor that weren't necessarily as easily to integrate, making those things more available. Then looking at things like a UNS to give structure and understanding to that data, to then giving the other side of the fence the tools they need to then work with that data and, again, understand its provenance, understand the context of that data. So this way, we see Node-RED used on both sides of the fence just because it can provide that a common language, a common understanding between the two. And again, because it isn't specifically an IoT tool that you can get Node-RED talking to Salesforce, you get Node-RED talking to social media, you can get Node-RED talking to all sorts of different places. That it's always fun to see where someone shares their Node-RED editor and they've got a tab where here's all our business critical stuff, and then here are a couple of the tabs. So there's little experiments they've done on the side that actually might sound frivolous, but they wouldn't have been able to do them without Node-RED sat there and able to pull together and connect those things. So I think that's the...
Now, like I've got one dashboard tab for my home automation system with all the temperatures and energy usage and all that sort of stuff. And then I've got an API tab that tells me the EPL results as well. So, those types of, I guess, integrations under one platform, one umbrella is perfect, right, for that kind of bridging between systems as well in one a single pane of glass type operation as well.
Thanks for that. That's because what I find is that because so many platforms around, one of the things that we're encouraging, especially people we talk to, and Phil and I are big advocates in that learning space, and we're always learning for more. I'm hoping that this is a really good, actually, Phil, this is a really good podcast, by the way, because it's really opening the eyes of a solution that we've heard many times being spoken about. I know you've played with it, Phil, but I'd like to see it, people get excited and start learning more about Node-RED and all the applications from the webinars. And look, there's a plethora of YouTube videos on Node-RED as well, and a lot of courses on how to do it. And obviously now with FlowFuse, really allowing it to go beyond just being an open source product, but actually a certified node where companies can be confident and comfortable with using it. So learning is a big part of that. And in talking about learning, Nick, tell us what you're looking forward to learning. What are you developed an incredible product, but what are you learning? What are you learning towards it?
So I think for me, it is always, as I mentioned before, it's hearing those stories of how people are actually using it, because it's been used in so many different ways that I never dreamt of. But for me, that's the learning experience, that understanding how people are using it, and then just taking that step back and saying, okay, how have they done that? Is there something we could have done to make it even easier for them to do it? Or how can we learn from that so that the next time someone else needs to do that, it's even easier? So we've mentioned UNS a couple of times. I appreciate it. That isn't the only NQC solution out there, but it is super common. But I think there are things we can learn in Node-RED from that about better understanding of the data you're working with, and this has been a hot topic in the community very recently was around, in the Node-RED editor, having just better tools to help you understand what actual data you've got. It sounds simple little things like when you're editing a node, just let me auto-complete the name of a property on the data I'm working on based on the actual data that's flowing through. So I'm not having to guess. I'm not having to capture some data, study it, and then work out what I need to do. Things like having schemas for your data so you can actually, again, thinking about how an organization would want to work in this environment where you've got one team perhaps capturing the data and passing it up, another team then wanting to do work. Again, bridging that IT-OT gap. I think right now there's still some inherent knowledge about what data you've got that has to be passed between the two outside of the context of Node-RED to help both sides work with the data. What if there was a more structured way of doing it? Again, things like UNS, Sparkplug, some really interesting stuff. Keep in mind, I have a long history with Entity. I'm sort of an Entity purist. I've worked with Entity since before it was a public thing. And I will say, we're 10 days away from Entity's 25th birthday when we're recording this. So it's 25 years old, which makes me realize, okay, I've been working with it for quite some time, but having worked on the spec of Entity as a pure protocol, to then seeing how people are laying things on top is really interesting. And I feel the same about Node-RED of what are the tools we could have in Node-RED just to help you work with the data better and make better sense of it. Things like that. Things like, I've got a long shopping list of things I think Node-RED could do better. But I'm my own worst critic, as it were. But things like tests. Traditional software development, you don't write a single line of code without having the test to back it up. Why should low code be any different? Why should a low code developer not be able to somehow create some tests that can be run to validate what the application they're building? I found that to be a really interesting vein of thought of what are the traditional software development practices that can be transferred to the low code environment without, whilst retaining that low code ethos of being accessible. So I think that's a really interesting area. But I've been on, I've done talks over the years, and I've talked about that one that's been a long-term desire that we, again, just not quite haven't quite cracked the magic of yet. But I look forward to getting there one day.
We recently talked to one of our guests about knowledge and literally about knowledge graphs, about, how that data is flowing through the system. And okay, there's this, structure around direct comparison rather than, contextualization, right? And, you don't know, what is impacting that data potentially coming through the system. And then also, from a Node-RED point of view, it'd be cool to kind of it knows what the structure of the data is coming. So then it has that configuration point, right, to help that along the way. So I'm a backer and a believer of that as well. So it's super interesting, and I'm sure there's hundreds of hours of conversations that you could have for sure.
One final question here before we start signing off. And this is probably a very novice question, Nick. I understand the node part of a Node-RED. What's the red mean?
What's the red mean? Well, it was winding back the clock for 30 minutes. No? So it was...
No, I'm eager to hear it.
Well, listen, what's the red part? It's a capital letter, so I imagine an acronym.
So it was coming up with a name for the project back... right at the start, when it was a little internal code project. And Dave, the co-creator, Dave Cormier-Jones, sort of joked, the fact it's written on top of the Node.js runtime and it's got nodes in it. We thought, that's Node. And then he joked, it's a code red. It was like an emergency. Let's call it Node-RED. And because we were IBM and we knew everyone would expect us to do something about being it blue, and we were being slightly rebellious, we thought, let's go with red. Node-RED, and it's a stuck. And then we have kind of agreed over the years that, if we've never tried to come up with a definition, but rapid event developer, if I'm really pushed, and if someone really feels that they want red to stand for
That sounds like an That's an afterthought, though.
absolute afterthought. The origins were very much just over a coffee, a little joke that stuck, and we haven't looked back.
That's definitely one of the, I guess, the best ways to create ideas is, a group of, friends, cohorts trying to, get somewhere and having a bit of a laugh and a joke. And that kind of really talks to the spirit of Node-RED as well. So that's a really great, I guess, closing point on today's episode. So look, Nick, thank you. It's been fascinating hearing about your journey and getting to know a bit more about Node-RED. As I said, I'm a huge fan of the project, and I think it's given the industry so much value throughout the years. It's just been an amazing development as well for not just engineering type people, but home automation enthusiasts, IT professionals across the board. So really thank you for your efforts over the years as well, and thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks again. Yeah, I'm with Phil. Absolutely. For our listeners, I think if you never played or looked at or just heard of Node-RED and never gone deep, and there's no better time that you can hear from the developer himself, FlowFuse, what they're doing, their vision for the product and for the platform, and it's very much focused on the community. So I would encourage everyone to check out FlowFuse. Obviously, look at Node-RED and start playing with it, because I'm definitely going to be more of a player, especially after talking to you, Nick. So thanks again, Nick, for your time and for your passion, and for your co-workers. Thank you very much for giving us these wonderful tools to make our life even easier, for making it low code. So thank you for that.
You're welcome, guys. No, it's been great. As I said at the start, I love talking about the history of the project and what it's doing. And as I also said, I love hearing from the community. So it's an open invitation to your listeners. Please do reach out to the community and to me if you have a Node-RED story to tell, or you want to find out more. I always love having these conversations.
We'll definitely have the links to to all your contact details in the show notes there. And look, feel free to reach out. And from us at Unplugged and IoT Podcast, please like and subscribe to the podcast. And we thank you for tuning in.